teachings of Epictetus, a former Roman slave turned Stoic philosopher, and the Buddha, the founder of one of the world's great religions, may seem worlds apart at first glance. But when we explore their teachings, we find surprising similarities. These two thinkers, separated by time and culture, reached remarkably similar conclusions about the human condition and the path to inner peace. Ever wondered what a Roman slave and a prince born in Nepal might agree on? You know, it's funny how life sometimes brings together the most unlikely pairs, like peanut butter and jelly, or in this case, a Roman slave and an Indian prince. Who would have thought? Could Epictetus be the Stoic Buddha? In this video, we'll explore the wisdom shared by Epictetus and the Buddha. We'll discover how Epictetus's Stoic principles can serve as a bridge for Westerners to better understand and appreciate Buddhist teachings, and how both traditions offer practical guidance for navigating life's challenges with greater clarity, resilience, and equanimity. As we compare the teachings of these two great minds, we find a wisdom that is timeless and universal. Their insights into desire, mental discipline, and inner peace are just as applicable today as they were centuries ago. The East-West divide. The notion of an unbridgeable chasm separating Eastern and Western thought has long been a common assumption. Westerners often point to towering intellects like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, celebrating their emphasis on reason, logic, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. The East, in turn, is frequently characterized by its rich spiritual traditions, with Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism all placing great emphasis on intuition, mindfulness, and the cultivation of inner wisdom. Rudyard Kipling once wrote, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." But what if I told you that Kipling's geography teacher got it wrong? Let's see how Epictetus and the Buddha challenge this notion. This presumed dichotomy has led many to conclude that the teachings of Eastern and Western thinkers are fundamentally incompatible, with little insight to offer one another. The wisdom of the Buddha, some might argue, has no place in the intellectual discourse of the West, while the logical arguments of Greek philosophers seem ill-suited to the introspective practices of the East. However, as we examine the lives and ideas of Epictetus and the Buddha, this stark East-West contrast begins to break down. Their teachings reveal a shared understanding of the human condition that transcends cultural and geographic boundaries, suggesting that the perceived divide between Eastern and Western thought may be more a product of our own preconceptions than a reflection of reality. Slave and sage, Epictetus and the Buddha. Though separated by centuries and cultures, Epictetus and the Buddha shared a journey from hardship to wisdom. Epictetus started as a slave in ancient Rome, while Siddhartha Gautama, the future Buddha, was born a prince in Nepal. Despite their different beginnings, both underwent profound transformations to become two of history's most influential thinkers. Epictetus, whose very name means acquired in Greek, spent much of his early life as the property of a wealthy Roman freedman. Yet, even in the face of the immense challenges and indignities of slavery, Epictetus discovered a path to inner freedom through the study of Stoic philosophy. He learned that true liberty lay not in external circumstances, but in one's ability to master one's own mind and emotions. Epictetus once said, "It is difficulties that show what men are." Discourses 1.24.1. His own challenges as a slave undoubtedly shaped his philosophy and his emphasis on inner freedom. The Buddha, born Siddhartha Gautama, lived a life of luxury and ease as a young prince, shielded from the realities of human suffering. However, a series of encounters with an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and a wandering ascetic sparked a profound spiritual crisis. Determined to find a solution to the problem of suffering, Siddhartha renounced his royal title and set out on a path of asceticism and meditation. Both Epictetus and the Buddha ultimately found liberation through the power of their own minds. Epictetus, though he remained a slave for much of his life, discovered that true freedom lay in the cultivation of wisdom and virtue. The Buddha, after years of struggle and searching, attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, realizing the true nature of the mind and the path to the cessation of suffering. Divergence and confluence. Epictetus and the Buddha, despite their shared insights into the human condition, came from different philosophical and cultural backgrounds. Stoicism, Epictetus's school of thought, is a Greek philosophy that stresses reason, logic, and living in harmony with nature. Buddhism, on the other hand, originated in India and centers on the nature of the mind, the roots of suffering, and the path to spiritual freedom. Stoic and Buddhist thoughts differ in their metaphysical beliefs. Stoics see the universe as a single divine entity governed by rational logos, while Buddhists emphasize impermanence and reject the idea of a supreme being. I guess you could say that for Stoics, the glass is half full with divine reason, while for Buddhists, the glass is just a temporary vessel bound to break someday. But hey, at least they both agree that getting too attached to the glass is a recipe for disappointment. Yet, despite these differences, Epictetus and the Buddha converged in their understanding of the fundamental challenges of human existence. Both recognized the suffering that arises from attachment to impermanent things and the futility of seeking happiness in external circumstances. They taught that true peace and contentment can only be found within through the cultivation of wisdom, self-discipline, and detachment. In their teachings on the nature of desire, Epictetus and the Buddha offer strikingly similar advice. Both stress the significance of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control and focusing our energy on the former. They told us to let go of our attachments to external outcomes and cultivate inner contentment, recognizing that true happiness comes from within. Governing desire, skillful and unskillful cognition. Central to the teachings of Epictetus and the Buddha is the idea that our desires and thoughts have a profound impact on our happiness and well-being. Both thinkers recognize that not all desires are created equal, and that learning to distinguish between skillful and unskillful desires is essential to finding inner peace and contentment. The Buddha taught desire is the root of suffering, Dhammapada 359. He recognized that our cravings and aversions are often the source of our discontent. In Buddhist thought, the term tanha is often used to describe the kind of craving or thirst that leads to suffering. But, as the Buddhist scholar Robert Morrison points out, tanha is not a condemnation of all desire, but rather a recognition of the fundamental human condition of dissatisfaction that arises from attachment to impermanent things. The Buddha explained that by learning to recognize and let go of unskillful desires, we can find freedom from suffering. The same, Epictetus taught that our desires should be grounded in reason and virtue, rather than in the pursuit of external pleasures or rewards. He counseled his students to focus their efforts on what is within their control, such as their own thoughts and actions, rather than on things outside their control, such as the opinions of others or the vagaries of fortune. By cultivating wisdom and self-discipline, Epictetus believed that we can learn to govern our desires and find true contentment. Epictetus and the Buddha acknowledged that cultivating skillful desire and wise cognition is challenging. It demands persistent mindfulness, introspection, and a readiness to confront our ingrained thought and behavior patterns. Nevertheless, both philosophers provided practical methods and tools for developing wisdom and inner peace, such as the Stoic practice of self-examination and the Buddhist mindfulness of breathing meditation. Buddhist skillfulness and Epictetan internals. One of the most striking parallels between the teachings of Epictetus and the Buddha lies in their emphasis on the importance of distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not. For Epictetus, this distinction was encapsulated in the concept of internals and externals. The idea that our thoughts, beliefs, and actions are within our power, while external events and the opinions of others are ultimately beyond our control. Epictetus reminds us the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Discourses 2.5.4-5. Epictetus said that by focusing our efforts on what is within our control, we can cultivate inner peace and equanimity, even in the face of life's challenges and uncertainties. He advised his students to let go of their attachment to external outcomes and instead focus on developing wisdom, virtue, and self-mastery. Epictetus believed that we can become truly free, even if our external circumstances remain unchanged. Equally, the Buddha taught that true happiness and liberation come from within, rather than from external sources. He emphasized the importance of cultivating skillful mental states and letting go of unskillful ones, such as greed, hatred, and delusion. By developing mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, the Buddha believed that we can free ourselves from the cycle of suffering and find lasting peace and happiness. The parallels between Epictetus's concept of internals and the Buddha's emphasis on skillful mental states are striking. Both thinkers recognize that our happiness and well-being ultimately depend on our own minds, rather than on external circumstances. They taught that by cultivating inner peace, wisdom, and self-discipline, we can find freedom and contentment, even in the face of life's challenges and uncertainties. The inward turn. Epictetus and the Buddha recognized that the path to inner peace and happiness begins with an inward turn, a shift in focus from the external world to the inner landscape of our own minds. They taught that by cultivating self-awareness, introspection, and mental discipline, we can begin to free ourselves from the tyranny of our own thoughts and emotions. For Epictetus, this inward turn was encapsulated in the idea of focusing on what is within our control, our own thoughts, beliefs, and actions. As explained just before, Epictetus believed that we can find true freedom and happiness, regardless of our external circumstances. It's like when you're lying in bed at night, and suddenly your mind starts replaying that embarrassing thing you said in 5th grade. Epictetus and the Buddha would be the first to tell you, hey, that's not in your control anymore. Let it go and focus on the present. In the same way, the Buddha taught that the key to liberation from suffering lies in understanding the nature of our own minds. He encouraged his followers to cultivate mindfulness, to observe their thoughts and emotions with detachment and clarity, and to let go of unhealthy mental states like craving and aversion. Through this practice of self-awareness and mental discipline, the Buddha believed that we can begin to see through the illusions of the self and find true peace and freedom. Both Epictetus and the Buddha recognized that this inward turn is not always easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront the darker aspects of our own minds. Yet, both thinkers also emphasized that the rewards of this inner work are immeasurable. A deeper sense of peace, purpose, and connection to ourselves and others. As we've explored the teachings of Epictetus and the Buddha, we've seen that these two great thinkers, though separated by time and culture, shared a profound understanding of the human condition. Both recognized that the path to inner peace and happiness lies not in external circumstances, but in the cultivation of wisdom, self-discipline, and mental clarity. As the Buddha said, peace comes from within, do not seek it without. Dhammapada 154. Epictetus echoed this sentiment when he wrote, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." Enchiridion 5. Their wisdom reminds us that true happiness and peace lie within our own minds and hearts. Comparing Stoic and Buddhist thought helps us bridge the apparent divide between Eastern and Western traditions. We can see that the fundamental challenges of the human experience, the desire for happiness, the struggle with suffering, the search for meaning and purpose, transcend cultural and historical boundaries. In the teachings of Epictetus and the Buddha, we find a timeless wisdom that speaks to the heart of the human condition. Take the wisdom of Epictetus and the Buddha into your life. Observe your thoughts and emotions mindfully and clearly. Notice when you fall into unhealthy patterns of desire or aversion, and practice letting go. Cultivate gratitude, compassion, and equanimity, and watch your inner world transform. The journey toward inner peace and happiness is an ongoing process, not a final destination. It requires patience, perseverance, and a willingness to keep showing up, even when things get difficult. But with the guidance of great thinkers like Epictetus and the Buddha, and the support of a community of fellow seekers, we can all take steps towards a more meaningful, fulfilling, and awakened life. If you discovered something valuable in this exploration of Epictetus, the Buddha, and the parallels between Stoicism and Buddhism, please share this video with others who may be searching for wisdom and guidance. And be sure to check out our other videos where Matt and I explore more fascinating topics related to mindfulness, personal growth, and the art of living wisely. Leave a comment below to share your own insights and experiences, and subscribe to Buddha's Wisdom for more content on mindfulness, personal growth, and the art of living wisely. Together, we can learn from the great minds of the past and create a more compassionate, awakened future. Until next time, stay present, stay resilient, and keep seeking the wisdom within. Namaste.